Katie Couric. Tonight, it was the first front in the war on terror. And in Afghanistan now, the Taliban are back with a vengeance. Lara Logan has an unprecedented encounter with Al-Qaeda's best friends. A gusher in the Gulf, the biggest U.S. oil find in years. But does that mean you'll find cheaper prices at the pump? Free speech. Everyone is entitled to his or her opinion, and we're giving folks a chance to express them right here.
Nobody wants to hear what we have to say because we don't foam at the mouth, call your mama names, or say anything that's going to juice the ratings.
And in something we're calling snapshots, Vanity Fair has the baby picture everyone has been waiting for. And tonight, so do we.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you tonight. For many Americans today, it was back to work and back to school. But in the war on terror, you have to wonder, is it back to the drawing board? It's easy to forget Afghanistan is where that war began, and that 21,000 U.S. servicemen and women are still there. Now, nearly 5 years after U.S. forces defeated the Taliban and scattered the Al-Qaeda terrorists they were protecting, the Taliban and their terror tactics are back. This year, roadside bombings are up 30%, suicide bombings up 100%. More than 100 U.S. and NATO troops have been killed. In response, the allies have launched a counteroffensive against the Taliban, killing as many as 60 today alone. Our chief foreign correspondent, Lara Logan, had unprecedented access to some Taliban fighters in one of their new strongholds in Ghazni province. Here's her exclusive report.
What is it? Our tense journey into Taliban territory followed 6 months of negotiations with their commanders. Their nervous liaison insisted I cover everything but my eyes. As we got closer, these two armed Taliban fighters arrived to escort us along the dirt roads through several villages. We were in Ghazni, just 2 hours south of the Afghan capital.
He's going to see?
We couldn't film openly yet.
Something wrong, you know?
And for the last part of the journey,
Am I allowed to smile?
we're ordered to walk.
Come slow.
Finally arriving to this, more than 100 Taliban fighters, America's enemy, brazenly flaunting their weapons in broad daylight. Their senior commander defiantly declared them stronger and more popular than they were before the U.S. invasion. That's a far cry from what I found last time I came to Ghazni.
This is how many American soldiers...
The U.S. military brought me here more than 2 years ago to show off how they'd driven the Taliban out. Now the Taliban were showing off their success in taking back some of that ground. Before this war, American forces were our friends, this Taliban commander told us. But now, after this occupation and their barbaric cruelty, we're no longer with them. To get out of Taliban-controlled areas, you have to travel on roads they have mined. So we were given an escort to navigate around the deadly bombs.
There's another mine.
Here, he's marking one with his foot, while our driver inches past. The top U.S. general in Afghanistan admits Ghazni is one of the worst spots in the Taliban resurgence.
You guys ready?
That's made the past year the bloodiest ever for U.S. forces here.
You do have areas of Afghanistan right now, in particular provinces in the south and in certain districts where Taliban strength is greater than it was last year.
Does that surprise you to see that, to know that is happening?
It's a hard enemy that we're up against. It's an enemy that doesn't know borders.
American officials point to other areas where security is much improved and play down the fight raging daily in the south. But when NATO took over the southern region from U.S. forces in August, they lost 9 soldiers in their first week. Their commanding general says the situation is much worse than expected.
There's no doubt people are frustrated, and the Taliban are exploiting that sense of frustration.
Is this a turning point, do you think, for Afghanistan?
I think the next 3 to 6 months are critical.
As long as the Taliban are able to wage war inside Afghanistan, American success will not be assured. And today, they're more confident than ever. On our visit, in a scene unimaginable just 2 years ago, armed Taliban fighters gathered openly for prayer, weapons at the ready. Less less than 10 miles from a U.S. base. Lara Logan, CBS News, Ghazni, Afghanistan.
The war on terror began, of course, with the September 11th attacks on the United States. Today, President Bush warned Americans not to get complacent about the continuing terror threat. Here's our chief White House correspondent, Jim Axelrod.
President Bush is casting the war on terror in new terms yet again, charting a course for the future while looking at evils of the past.
Bin Laden and his terrorist allies have made their intentions as clear as Lenin and Hitler before them. The question is, will we listen? Will we pay attention to what these evil men say?
9 weeks before the midterm elections, Mr. Bush used terrorists in their own words to make his point. First, Osama bin Laden.
Death is better than living on this earth with the unbelievers among us.
Bin Laden's right-hand man, Zawahiri.
The whole world is an open field for us.
And quoting Hezbollah's leader Nasrallah, fresh off his war with Israel.
Death to America will remain our reverberating and powerful slogan.
Clearly, the president hopes his strong suit, the war on terror, will absorb his weakness, the war in Iraq. And that requires making the struggle larger than any single terrorist.
This is the great ideological struggle of the 21st century. And it is the calling of our generation.
The president warned that danger remains and sacrifice is required, but that he's confident in the ultimate outcome. Essentially, Katie, this was a stick with me speech.
All right, Jim Axelrod at the White House. Jim, thank you so much. Few people have written about the war on terror as extensively as New York Times columnist Tom Friedman. I spoke to him a short time ago and asked him about the president's latest efforts to shore up support for the war.
What is the president saying, Katie? He's saying, we're in the fight of our life, the World War III of our generation, but let's have a tax cut and shrink the size of our armed forces. We're in the fight of our life, Katie, but let's only send enough troops in Iraq to depose Saddam Hussein, but not enough to control the borders and really create a secure environment for democracy to flourish there. We've been summoned to D-Day, but not really given the moral, strategic, economic, and political strategy to win D-Day at all.
Meanwhile, we saw the Taliban is back in a big way and is once again a big threat. Things seem to be going well in Afghanistan. What happened? Why is it unraveling now?
Well, you know, Katie, it's really a smaller version of the Iraq story, which is it's security, security, security. What Lara Logan's piece really shows, where American forces are present in numbers, where they create a secure environment, good things flower. Where they're not present, bad things happen.
Everyone, needless to say, is looking toward the 5th anniversary of September 11th. And everyone is asking this question, are we safer now than we were? What do you think?
Well, you know, in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. Obviously, we've done a lot more in this country to take seriously the threat at our borders through immigration and whatnot. But at the same time, you know, one really weeps for that moment of solidarity in this country after 9/11. You know, we as a country have always historically been in the business of exporting hope and not fear. And in the last few years, we've really reversed that. We're a country that is seen widely around the world as exporting fear and not hope.
Is there any way to change that?
We got to get back to that.
But how do you do that?
Well, you know, part of it really starts at the top. It really starts with the president, and there's nothing wrong with highlighting the threats we face, but we've got to get back to that America, you know, that people look to as that kind of naive, optimistic place as well.
And I'll have an exclusive interview with President Bush tomorrow night, right here on the CBS Evening News. As many of you know, next Monday is the 5th anniversary of the worst terror attack on U.S. soil, and it's still taking a toll. A study out today says nearly 7 out of 10 recovery workers at Ground Zero have experienced lung problems. A big shakeup at the struggling Ford Motor Company. Bill Ford is stepping down as CEO of the company his great-grandfather founded. He's being replaced by Alan Mulally, who turned Boeing around. People are still talking about the terrible death of crocodile hunter Steve Irwin. There was an outpouring of emotion all over Australia today as his body was returned to his hometown. For more about the life and death of Steve Irwin and other news, go to our website at cbsnews.com. Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, it may be a record discovery of black gold in the Gulf of Mexico. But does it mean you'll be yelling Eureka at the gas pump? Eye on Your Money is next. The folks at Chevron today felt like they won the lottery when they announced that they struck oil in the Gulf of Mexico. They say it may be the biggest find in a generation. But what impact will it have on the price you pay at the pump? Here's Anthony Mason with Eye on Your Money.
This ship drilled the record-breaking well. Analysts say the field, 175 miles offshore, could become our biggest homegrown source of oil. Chevron had the first strike, but Shell is looking there too.
So if the technology can keep up with it, there's more reserves to be had there.
Last week, Shell flew us to the Ram Powell, a 46-story structure floating 80 miles out in the Gulf.
This is the newest well they're drilling on Ram Powell. This platform can handle 70,000 barrels of crude a day. Now, to give you an idea of just how much that is, you could drive your car for 55 million miles on that.
From these wells to your wheels, here's what goes into the price of a gallon of gas. Just getting the crude out of the ground makes up more than half the cost, but then refining, distribution, and taxes all add to the price at the pump.
This is one of the larger platforms in the Gulf. In all, there are 4,000 oil structures in these waters that provide a quarter of the country's energy, which is why every time a hurricane heads this way, your gas prices spike higher.
Last year, Katrina made a direct hit on Shell's Mars platform.
You know, we knew it was the best that could be built, but we didn't know what we would find the next day.
They found that Mars' 1,000-ton drilling rig had snapped off and slammed into the platform. It used to look just like the towering rig on Ram Powell.
And this is what fell over in Katrina?
This is what fell over.
Greg Guidry heads Shell's Eastern Gulf operations.
So these bolts, is that what broke?
That's correct.
A mammoth crane had to be brought in to hoist Mars' toppled rig.
What was the cost to Shell of Katrina and Rita?
Well, Jose, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Even with that repair bill, Shell still made a $25 billion profit last year as Katrina drove gas prices to record highs. When Hurricane Ernesto threatened last week, some Ram Powell workers were briefly evacuated. But in Shell's New Orleans Operations Center,
we're already looking at the next one over here coming off Africa.
That storm's called Florence, and the price of our gas could literally depend on which way her winds blow. Anthony Mason, CBS News in the Gulf.
Coming up, something new for the evening news besides me. We call it free speech.
Liberal, conservative, red state, blue state, right, wrong, us, them, tastes great, less filling, you name it. Well, I don't buy it.
We're trying a few new things here on the evening news. One is something we're calling free speech. Expressing your opinion is very American, one of the many privileges of living in this country. We want to encourage more civil discourse, so we're giving people a forum to express themselves unfiltered and uninterrupted. And the lack of civil discourse is precisely what our first free speech is all about. Morgan Spurlock is the author of Supersize Me, and tonight he's got a beef about going to extremes.
It seems like every time I turn on the TV, some reputable news source is telling me how we're a nation divided. Liberal, conservative, red state, blue state, right, wrong, us, them, tastes great, less filling, you name it. Well, I don't buy it. You see, today's news has become just like professional wrestling. When Hulk Hogan puts his face right up to the camera and tells Randy Savage that my 22-inch pythons mean the end to you, brother, he's a mirror image of the politicians, the pundits, the spin doctors, the pitchmen, and the PR flunkies that put their faces right up to hundreds of cameras every day and tell us how they're right and how the other guys are out of their minds. Well, let me tell you something, brother. I've traveled to every state in this great nation. Well, every state except Maine, but that's only because they don't take off their long johns until May. And what I've discovered in my travels is that we're not a nation divided at all. We're just a country that's buying into the smackdown hype. Truth is, most of us don't live on the extreme ends they like to portray. The majority of us are camped out here in the middle. But nobody wants to hear what we have to say because we don't foam at the mouth, call your mama names, or say anything that's going to juice the ratings. And that's what it's all about. It's all about the grandstanding, the name-calling, and the yelling into the camera. Well, don't believe the hype. Change in this country doesn't come from the person with the greatest decibels. Freedom of speech has a purpose, to make this the best nation we can dream of. If we can say anything, if we can have a real civil discourse, then and only then will we find the best solutions to our problems. Without that, it's just showbiz.
You're going to hear a lot of different opinions. Some of the people you'll recognize, Rush Limbaugh, for instance, this Thursday. Some you won't, and we're sure you won't always agree. But we'd love to hear your reaction. And if you have something you'd like to get off your chest, exercise your right to free speech by going on our website at cbsnews.com. Here's another new feature. It's called Snapshots, and we begin with some vintage ones from one of the early CBS News broadcasts. The anchor was Douglas Edwards, and the photos are of 19-week-old Prince Charles back in 1949.
This perhaps is my favorite of Bonnie King Charlie to be of the United Kingdom.
So in keeping with tradition, we have some very special baby pictures tonight. An exclusive first look at Vanity Fair's newest cover girl. She's Suri Cruise, daughter of Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes. After much speculation about why she's been undercover so long, this is proof positive that, yes, Suri, she does exist. The Annie Leibovitz photo shoot, incidentally, was top secret, and the article was completed in an undisclosed location under heavy security. The magazine hits newsstands tomorrow. Coming up next, giving children who have so little precious images they and you will never forget.
If it can raise the net level of compassion in the world by that much, I'll be happy.
That's Peter Gabriel's hit song, In Your Eyes, and we think it's the perfect song for a picture-perfect idea. Here's Steve Hartman.
At the base of that volcano, in the middle of Lake Nicaragua, there's an orphanage. And although third world orphanages aren't normally festive places, on this day, at this one, there was reason to celebrate.
Thank you.
The arrival of a young man named Ben Schumacher. He comes from a faraway place called Wisconsin, and he comes bearing gifts.
Ideally, these would be something that the kids could hold on to for their whole lives.
What's in the suitcase is 62 pounds of portraits.
Muchas gracias.
Portraits of the kids.
Está muy bonita.
Portraits for just about each and every one of them.
Very beautiful. They share everything, so they don't have much that they can call their very own.
Jaden Kern is a director at the orphanage.
I think that it will touch them profoundly once they get down and get a private moment to sit and look at that picture.
Remember, these kids didn't have parents snapping baby pictures.
Oh. Wow.
Most don't even have a single photo, let alone a precious painting.
Oh, that's nice.
It is nice.
Ben calls this the Memory Project. He started it in college and still runs it out of a bedroom at his parents' house in Madison.
Honduras, Haiti.
So far, he's given out more than 4,000 portraits
Zimbabwe,
to orphans around the world.
And finally, Lebanon right there.
Of course, Ben doesn't paint them all. Instead, he gets someone to take pictures of the kids, then sends the pictures to high school art teachers across America, who assign the portraits to their students.
And this is where Ben's idea goes from good to genius. See, the American kids who paint these portraits have to spend hours staring into the faces of their orphan subjects. And Ben says after working on them for so long, after painting the eyes especially, there's often a real connection.
The artist said she liked painting your eyes because they are so expressive.
You know, every day they come into the art classroom and bam, there it is, looking right into the eyes.
And they've got to wonder about that kid.
Definitely. To be totally honest, that's the main reason why I do this work.
Ben says for every portrait he gives out, there's a student back home who's now a little more aware of our needy world.
That's the student right there who made it.
That's why eventually he'd like to make his memory project part of every high school art class in the country.
And if it can raise the net level of compassion in the world by that much, I'll be happy.
Compassion. To Ben, that's a word worth 1,000 pictures. Steve Hartman, CBS News, Nicaragua.
And another wonderful thing about this story, some of the art students have now become friends and pen pals of the children whose portraits they painted. Now, before we go tonight, all summer long, people have been asking me, how will you sign off at the end of your broadcast? I've racked my brain, and so far, nothing has felt right. But here's a look at how some well-known anchors have signed off through the years.
Good night, and good luck.
Good night, Chet. Good night, David. And that's the way it is, Thursday, August 30th, 1962. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
Thank you for joining us. Courage.
Saying good night and good news.
I'm Ron Burgundy. You stay classy, San Diego.
All clear.
I'm not sure any of those will work for me, but if you have a bright idea for a great sign-off, log on to our website at cbsnews.com and tell me. I know we'll have a lot of fun reading them, and who knows, maybe one will actually stick. But for now, all I have to say is, I'm Katie Couric. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you tomorrow night.
For news 24 hours a day, click on cbsnews.com. Sponsored in part by Walmart. It's rollback season, and we roll back the price on 10,000 of your favorite items. Stop in today and save big. CBS News. See it now, anytime, anywhere.